You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show with Dr. Tina Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, I am giving you the Histamine 101 lesson. I made a post on Instagram last week. It went bonkers and so many comments. I have not seen that many comments. I mean, we're well over 1,000 or more. Normally I get a couple hundred. So you guys were very interested in this topic, and then my DMs blew up simultaneously and emails have been coming in and everybody's wondering, how do we stabilize the histamine? Because I was talking about HRT and how some people are intolerant to estrogen and how that may very well be to do with your histamine. And I said the key is you've got to get your histamine stabilized, and then the HRT may stick better or work better or be more tolerated. And so the big question was how to stabilize histamine. Unfortunately, there is not a simple answer. So if you want a simple answer, I suggest you sign off now. This is a very complicated conversation. I am actually going to bring on a histamine expert. I am not the expert, although I have treated this for decades in my clinic. I live it. I have lived it since childhood. So I get it. I have a lot of insight on this. I'm going to share that on this episode today. But as far as treating this goes, it's not a supplement. It's not a pill. There's not an easy answer. It goes deep and we have to find the root cause. I'm a naturopathic physician. At the end of the day, we have to find the root cause. I know that term gets thrown around a lot by health influencers who maybe don't actually know what it means, because you have to have a very deep understanding of physiology to understand, and pathophysiology to understand how to even go backwards down to the root. So it's kind of like the iceberg. You know, you see this much of it, and then everything down below is really what's happening. And a lot of folks really understand this. And so when you're hearing about it online, it's like, oh, just treat the parasites or just treat the mold or just treat this. It's not that simple. If your histamine's popping off, it means your immune system is freaking the F out. That's what it means. So my thought process is, why is your immune system freaking the F out? The histamine's a symptom. It's actually irrelevant at the end of the day. The real problem is, why is your immune system overreacting? So I'm going to explain what histamine is. I'm going to explain how it works. I'm going to explain where it comes from. I'm going to explain why those cells are there and what they do. I'm going to explain to you some of the deficiencies that may be occurring that may be leading to histamine intolerance, or MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, which is a more severe form. These are all just on a spectrum. I want you to think of it this way. All of this is just on a spectrum of your immune system freaking the F out. Okay? So we're going to go backwards, kind of unwind this and unpack it and try to figure out what maybe some of those root causes might be. And my goal is to leave you with some hope, because there are things that can be done, but this is not going to be solved with a pill, an antihistamine, or something simple. When I say we need to learn how to stabilize the histamine, that is multifactorial. And so we're going to get into it. So let's dive in. All right, so let's lay the groundwork here. What is histamine? Histamine is a biogenic amine. It is a chemical messenger. It plays several important roles in the body. It's supposed to be there. It's naturally occurring. Think of it like your alarm system. It is the high alert. It means go. You have mast cells, M-A-S-T, mast cells, that line your skin. All right, they predominantly line your skin. And those mast cells contain little packets of histamine. And when it's time to react, they blow histamine out of the cells, literally. They blow histamine. And that histamine sets off what you know as an allergic reaction. So at the end of the day, a histamine response is an allergic reaction. It's an allergic response. Okay. So last night, I'll give you an example, and that's why I decided to do this episode sooner than later. I was outside with my husband for no more than 5 minutes. He left the front door open. It is mosquito season hardcore in Oregon right now, out where we live, and they love me. I don't know what it is. We could speculate a million different reasons why. I take the B vitamins. I keep my blood sugar low. I have no idea what it is, but they love me. I think there's a genetic propensity. So I'm outside for no more, not even 5 minutes. And all of a sudden I feel bing, 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 bing on my legs. In 5 different spots, I feel my legs just, ow. So I go inside and the very familiar slow burn starts. It ramps up and it is so uncomfortable. And if you've ever had a histamine response to mosquito bites, you know what I'm talking about. People who don't have this don't understand. It is the most uncomfortable, burny, itchy pain. And it depends on what species bites me. There's 2 different main species out here. The big guys, which carry the bad stuff, their bites are different. These little guys, something starts burning. I've encountered these little critters in Arizona as well. It's almost like they just shot acid into you. And so this burny, itchy, nondescript pain takes over the region. You can't even tell where the bite is. You just know that a region, this big is starting to light up and you're like, oh my God. And so I've got 5 spots on my legs where this is happening and I can't tell where it's coming from. So now it's a combination of like temperature, pain, and itching all in one. That's what histamine does. It sets off so many of your different receptors in your body and it impacts so many different systems. And all of a sudden I'm freaking out. I'm trying to find the lavender oil and it almost creates a panic because so many of them hit me at once. I could feel it coming on. So finally I get the lavender oil out. By then the 5 bites had started to welt up and I could actually determine where they were geographically. So I could put some lavender oil on them. Pro tip here, lavender oil with a rollerball top works wonders. Put a little melaleuca oil in there and tends to work pretty quickly. Now, this whole thing happens over about 20 to 25 minutes. And so when it starts happening, I know it's going to be very uncomfortable. Unfortunately, in this case, my histamine blew. Whole body. So I'm laying down under soft cotton sheets, trying not to scratch my legs, just trying to apply the oil as the different bites react. And so it's like here, down on my legs. And I'm laying there and all of a sudden I hear bzzz, because my husband left the front door open. There was a frickin' mosquito in our bedroom and he gets in or maybe it's a female. It's the females who bite, right? And I've got my arm up like this, like trying not to itch myself. So I've got my arm up here because my dog's here and I'm petting him. And then I'm holding my phone with my other hand, trying to just relax and like focus on something else. So I'm reading an article and all of a sudden it bites me on my elbow and it bites me on my shoulder. And within minutes, again, nondescript location, can't find it. My whole tattoo blows up, meaning, I don't know if you guys have tattoos and have a histamine reaction, but if you have tattoos and your tattoos become geographic, meaning all of a sudden, all the hardcore lining like puffs up, that's a histamine response. And so it's an allergic response. So I'm sitting there like this whole thing is now bumpy and geographic, if you will, and I cannot find the bite. So I'm rubbing lavender oil all over my shoulder. I'm rubbing it all over the back of my elbow. And within moments, I'm prickly and itchy all across my face. My breathing becomes a little bit labored, not like dangerous, but like suddenly I'm aware of my breathing, I should say. And I'm very familiar with this because this has been going on since childhood. And I'm having a really pronounced histamine response. So I get up and I take a Zyrtec and I lay back down, take some homeopathy, lay back down. And it took me about an hour to get over this. And I was supposed to be getting in the shower because we shower before bed in our house. And I couldn't bear the thought of getting in a hot shower because, pro tip again, if you're having a histamine response, getting in a very hot shower will actually cause the histamine to blow even harder, but it might be a strategy. It's something my naturopathic doctor taught me decades ago. It might be a good strategy to get over it quicker because you literally blow all the histamine at once. All the mast cells react to the heat. This is why some of you with histamine responses will get hives or get welts or get itchy when you exercise or when you go sauna because you're having a histamine response. So the thought of getting in the shower and reigniting that whole thing was more than I could bear. And the Zyrtec was kicking in and it does make me a little drowsy. And I was like, I'm just going to go sit on the couch in my comfy organic cotton soft jammies and just chill and go to bed. And I'll wake up and everything will be fine. And sure enough, I wake up and they're not even raised enough for me I shaved my legs this morning and they weren't even raised up for me to catch them. So it's very quick and it's over fast. The big skeeters, those guys leave big welts that last for days, but that's a whole different reaction and it doesn't make me feel nearly as messed up as these little guys do. So if any of you are mosquito experts, please email the show, podcast@drtyna.com, and tell me the difference and what's going on because I need to know. All right, so what is histamine? We kind of went over that already. It comes from a couple different places, most notably the mast cells. These are white blood cells that live in your skin. They live in your lungs. They live in your gut lining, and they live in your connective tissues. This is why histamine responses can lead to breathing issues or breathing difficulties. It can lead to gut issues. In my case, I'll usually get loose stools or diarrhea, and it can lead to connective tissue issues, which most notably would be pain or discomfort, at least what I've seen clinically. Again, I've treated this a lot in clinic, and it's very tough to deal with, especially if people are non-compliant. So you're going to hear about all of that in a few minutes. All right. Think of them as first responders. Plain and simple. They're not elegant. They're like the Marines. They come in, this is how I described it to my husband. They come in and it's not elegant. It's just a full-on blast. It's like from air, from sea, from land, non-discriminate. This is not your Navy SEALs. These are not coming in and doing elegant takeout. These are first responders blowing shit up. That's mast cells, if you will, and histamine. They come out of our basophils, which is another type of white blood cells, and they are made in our enterochromaffin-like cells in the stomach, which help actually stimulate stomach acid. That's why drugs like, over-the-counter drugs like Prilosec will block acid production because of this cell in the stomach lining that actually is triggered by histamine and helps stimulate stomach acid. It can also come from your food. And this is where things get really tricky. There's a lot of different foods that are high in histamine. I'm going to give you a short list later on in the episode, so hang around. I'm going to give you some solutions, so hang around. But think of aged and fermented and improperly stored foods, and also leftovers. Who out there doesn't like leftovers? My whole life, every single person I've lived with, roommate, husband, partners, boyfriends, everyone. Why don't you eat your leftovers, Tina? I don't like leftovers. I don't feel good after I eat leftovers. I don't know why. I didn't know why until years ago when I learned about histamine. Histamine builds up in leftovers. This is why eating out at restaurants can be tricky. This is why eating food that's been stored for any period of time can be tricky. This is why I always want to cook my food fresh at home and prepare my meats and my vegetables at home fresh, because I don't like leftovers. Leftovers tend to accumulate histamine in them, and so you eat them and you don't feel good and you don't know why, and you blame the food and you blame the ingredients in the food, but it might just be that you have high histamine in that leftover dish, right? So this gets real tricky. And your gut bacteria, certain gut bacteria. There are certain strains of gut bacteria that make histamine. There's also the interjection of lipopolysaccharides, which is a whole other conversation. It gets real complicated real fast, but there are certain bugs that make lipopolysaccharides, and the presence of lipopolysaccharides can increase histamine too. So it all gets very messy and convoluted, and I will give you a hint for the end of this episode. Treat the gut first. That's what we're getting at here. What does it do in the body? It is an immune defense. It triggers inflammation to fight off invaders. It regulates stomach acid, like I mentioned, which helps you digest your food. It is involved in brain signaling. It works on neurotransmitters, influences alertness, appetite, and mood. I have seen high histamine individuals have psychosis induced because of histamine, particularly teenagers. The way that my histamine response presented in my teenage years is very different than it has presented in my perimenopausal, going into menopause years. And it's always impacted my mood. When I was younger, it drove panic attacks and anxiety. Now I'm much more familiar with that anxiety, and so it doesn't lead me into panic. Every so often, you may have experienced this, or you know someone who has experienced a panic attack. I would blame histamine, especially if it's just like nondescript, random panic attack out of nowhere. You've heard people say this, like, I am a totally calm, normal person, and then I freaked out and ended up in the ER thinking I was having a heart attack, and it just turned out to be a panic attack. I think there might be a histamine component there. And histamine can be related to POTS, which is like a postural orthostatic hypotension tachycardia syndrome, where your heart rate goes really fast, but your blood pressure dumps out. It's been implicated and related to hypermobility syndrome, ADHD. Like, histamine might be a player and has been connected as a player into several different triads of conditions. And it goes all ways, but having a really robust, profound histamine response can definitely lead you into feeling manic, mental, emotional, panic, you name it. And then vasodilation. So it opens up blood vessels to let immune cells get to where they need to go. But when you vasodilate really fast, all of a sudden your blood pressure dumps and you feel like you want to fall on the floor. Combo that with some adrenal dysfunction, and you've got, again, a very complicated picture. So what is histamine intolerance? How is that different from MCAS? Let's talk about that. Histamine intolerance means your body is accumulating more histamine than you can handle. So your bucket is full, if you will. You have a bucket, it's too much, and you are now pouring histamine out. You're making too much, you're getting too much from your gut bugs, you're getting too much from your food. It's all just, your body can't empty it out enough. It can't break it down fast enough. There's an enzyme called DAO. It's diamine oxidase. It's made in your gut lining. So now imagine, you've heard me talk about the gut lining being compromised and potentially leading to a functional GLP-1 deficiency. Well, you can have a DAO deficiency as well because your gut is trashed and most people's guts are compromised. So you have this deficiency of this enzyme that is there in the gut to break down the histamine that comes through in the foods you're eating and in the environmental things that end up going down your gullet, right? So we need the DAO. Otherwise, your histamine builds up and overflows. Common symptoms, aside from what I've mentioned, you might experience flushing, hives or rashes, anxiety or panic attacks. Like I said, headaches are huge with this, migraines, headaches, bloating, nausea, diarrhea, hormonal flares, especially around your cycle. I get really profound gut changes everything gets loose. So if I have a high histamine meal, I'll wake up all puffy. I won't have slept well. I'll wake up usually if you wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like you're going to have a heart attack, that can be a histamine response because histamine likes to dump out around that time of night. So I'll wake up with that hot, sweaty, like bear is chasing me heart attack feeling, can't breathe sometimes, even gasping for air. Not uncommon. Been dealing with this my whole life. It's gotten worse with menopause. It gets worse as our hormones shift, ladies, and probably gentlemen too, when your testosterone starts to shift. And so anyway, I will wake up the next day and have really terrible GI issues. And I'm like, ugh, histamine, way too much histamine going through the gut at the time. What is MCAS? How is it different? Mast cell activation syndrome. It's when your mast cells are completely unstable and they trigger histamine and other inflammatory molecules just at the wrong time, at the wrong amount. So it's just you're just on the spectrum of it. It goes from having a normal histamine immune response to maybe having a little bit too robust to histamine intolerance to MCAS. Okay, so MCAS is nothing special in my opinion. It's a term I've heard thrown around more recently. When I was first in practice, it wasn't even a word. It wasn't even a term. Like it wasn't even a thing. Maybe some people were using it. I don't know, but I've heard it so much lately. Like I have MCAS. No, honey, you have an overactive immune system. I want you to think of it that way. You don't have MCAS. Your immune cells are freaking the fuck out. Your immune system is freaking the fuck out. And so we have to figure out, how do we calm your immune system down? It has nothing to do with anyone else's immune system. Why is your immune system overactive? Why is your histamine response so robust? Why is it triggering aberrantly? That's more interesting to me of a conversation than like, oh, I have MCAS and it's because of this. People really want to say they have this condition and then point it to this, right? They want to be like, connect the dots perfectly. It doesn't work that way. It's like a spider web. There's a million different reasons. You might have mold where you live. You may have been bitten by a tick at some point and you're rocking some low-key Lyme and you don't know it. You may have gotten your socks rocked by a virus. You may be reacted to the intervention that was forced upon most Americans in 2021 and 2022. That revs up immune systems. You can have a myriad of reasons why your immune system has decided to overreact. And now secondarily to that, you have the symptom of a robust, rotund histamine response that's aberrantly firing. Does that make sense? I hope it does. That's how I think about things. So when people say, what can I do for MCAS? What can I do to stabilize my histamine? What can I do for histamine intolerance? I'm like, ugh, this is a deep conversation and a very individual one. I would have to run comprehensive lab work on you, and I would have to analyze it myself, and I would have to do a physical exam on you, and I would have to take an elaborate history on you to tell you what you should do to get your histamine under control, right? Like, it's not as simple as saying, again, take this supplement or do this. There are things we can do to mitigate histamine when it's roaring, but what's far more interesting, so right now I am in a pretty high histamine state, and my question, and the reason I got re-interested in this was because why? Why is it happening? Pretty common around menopause, pretty common as hormone shifts, common as we bring on estrogen replacement therapy. Not uncommon, I should say. So why? What am I doing? What is it about my environment, the foods I'm eating, the relationships I'm having, the stress load that I have? All of these things impact your immune system and therefore impact your histamine response. Why? Is it happening to me right now, where I'm at right now? That's what's interesting. That's the conversation we should be having. And that, unfortunately, needs to happen between you and a really skilled physician. It's not a conversation that you have with this podcast or with ChatGPT even. You need to work with somebody who's going to run some tests on you. Every doctor has their favorites. I'm not going to give you a list of them, because you may show up to a great functional medicine doctor, a great naturopathic physician who's really gut first. Like, I really encourage you to find a gut first doctor who's going to treat the gut first, and at the very least, run your gut tests and start there, because that's where it starts, period. Because otherwise you're just chasing things around and it can be troublesome. So a lot of this comes down to the foods you choose to put in your mouth, and the stress levels you choose to keep, and the lack of exercise, and the lack of sunlight, and the lack of stress control, and all of that'll blow off your mast cells readily. So why is it a big deal right now? I think it's because, my honest opinion, I think COVID threw people's immune systems over the edge. And I think the intervention for that and the response to that people were forced to take, I did not take it. There was no version in this world where you could have convinced me or forced me to. I think that is triggering people's immune systems. It's just a factor. It's not the cause. I never look at anything as like, it's this one thing. We can point to this and say this is the root cause. That's not how it works. It doesn't work there. It doesn't work here. So if your immune system is hyperactive and it's doing funny things, we have to figure out why. Could be your living environment. Could be a lot of things. Could be not necessarily even long COVID. There's long cytomegalovirus. There's long Epstein-Barr virus. So if you know my back history, you know I got cytomegalovirus when I was 19. I really suffered for about 10 years from it. It still impacts me today. My titers are super low, but whatever happened to me back then threw my immune system off track. It then, spiraled into potentially some autoimmune conditions, and voila, here we are today. You could have a very bad flu. You could have any virus. You could have any of the herpes virus families impact you. You maybe don't even know. You maybe didn't even get sick. Maybe you had a little run-in with mono when you were in high school. And then decades later, you're rocking elevated Epstein-Barr virus, and it's continuing to replicate in your body and use you as a host. Lots of different viruses can set off your immune system. And long haulers is nothing new. Like, it didn't just happen, upon us when COVID hit. Like, I'm very glad that has brought attention to this, but there are many of us who have suffered needlessly and were gaslit and ignored and called crazy for a long, long, long time because we had some kind of post-viral sequelae that wouldn't go away, and that really, really ruined our lives. And I've been there, and I am a victim of that. And so that can be a part of this as well. Again, you could have a strain of mold living in your house somewhere, and it's not impacting your partner. It's not impacting your children, but it's setting your histamine response through the roof. So again, your histamine is coming from your mast cells, which are immune cells, and it's coming from basophils, which are immune cells, and it's coming from your gut, which is lined with an immune system. So it's your immune system gone rogue. Not necessarily autoimmune, but immune system gone rogue. All right, so let's break down some things here. Let's get into a little deeper. Let's talk about the DAO deficiency for a minute. This can come from a damaged gut or a leaky gut because it's made in your intestinal lining. And remember, we need the DAO enzyme to break down the histamine that we're eating. So if your gut is inflamed, infected, leaky gut, SIBO, candida, parasites, celiac, chronic food intolerances, chronic NSAID use like ibuprofen, your gut's messed up, you might have a histamine problem because you don't make any DAO. There's genetics. Some people are born with SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms. Some of these code for DAO. So you may not be making enough DAO. You may be underactive in your production. Estrogen dominance or high estrogen states can downregulate DAO. So I'm going to get in a minute to what I talked about on the reel, which was how estrogen can play in here. But estrogen itself can downregulate the enzyme that breaks down your histamine. So just that alone can be troublesome. So women may notice histamine issues get worse around ovulation, their period, during perimenopause, et cetera. And then there's nutrient deficiency. So DAO is a copper-dependent enzyme. If you're deficient in copper, it also needs B6, zinc, magnesium, iron to function well. So if you're missing those, which a lot of people are malnourished, undernourished, they're not making their DAO properly. And if you're depleted, this could come from stress, poor diet, gut issues, your DAO won't actually work or run properly. So here are some big DAO blockers, just so you know. NSAIDs. Any of you using chronic ibuprofen, I have an episode all about why you don't want to use ibuprofen and why I think it's really dangerous. I use it on occasion. I use it in a pinch. I do maybe, it's crazy what I see doctors prescribing milligram-wise. I won't, the pills come in 200 milligrams, the over-the-counter. I won't take more than 1 or 2 of those at a time, rarely 3. And I try to take it as infrequently as possible, although I used to live off ibuprofen as a teenager. So I probably did some severe damage to my gut. Antihistamines. So if you're using antihistamines to help with your histamine intolerance issue or your MCAS issue, it can also block DAO. So that's a problem, right? So you might want to consider supplementing DAO. You can get it in supplement form and you take it with meals or just before meals to help break it down. But that's not a easy way to live, right? Like we shouldn't have to depend on something. So using the antihistamines in a pinch or for a short period of time or as needed for histamine intolerance is one thing. And I know a lot of doctors prescribe that, but we never want to keep somebody on antihistamines for a long period of time. They have their own set of problems. And Benadryl's bad, you guys. Don't take Benadryl. Long story, but they have linked it definitively to dementia later in life. So we don't want to be taking Benadryl. Antidepressants. A lot of people taking daily antidepressants for long periods of time. That will block DAO. Antibiotics, that's going to mess up your gut flora. Antihypertensive, so high blood pressure medications, and then hormone replacement therapy and oral contraceptives. I'm assuming oral HRT, so I don't have anybody on oral estrogen, but some people do get prescribed oral estrogen. Those can mess with your DAO production. Alcohol is a double whammy. Alcohol releases histamine and it inhibits DAO. So if you're drinking alcohol regularly, it is problematic. And red wine is especially problematic. It is very high histamine. It is aged, it's fermented, it's full of sulfites. Bad news, you guys. It's like literally drinking a histamine bomb. And I'm so sad about this because I love wine so much. I love red wine. I live in wine country. I love it. And it doesn't love me back. Chronic stress. So elevated cortisol is going to activate your mast cells, get your mast cells all riled up. They're going to blow histamine preferentially. It's bad news. And you're going to downregulate gut function. You're going to screw up your hormones. Stress. I'm the queen of living in chronic stress, and stress really is just so destructive on so many levels. Microbiome dysbiosis, so having your gut bugs out of whack, and that can happen from any of the things I just mentioned. But again, this is why we start with the gut first. I do anyway. And then anti-inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. So anything that inflames the gut. So irritable bowel syndrome, that's not autoimmune. Okay, I think it could have I think there's a potential for IBS to have a bit of an autoimmune component. Celiac, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, anything that's going to chronically inflame the gut is going to crush your DAO levels, which is going to lead you to having potentially a more profound histamine response. So I'm talking about 2 separate things here. I'm talking about excessive histamine release, which is dependent on your immune system being revved up. And then I'm talking about inhibition or blocking or low levels of DAO, which is the histamine breaker downer enzyme that we need in the gut. So we've got 2 different issues going on here. You see why this starts to get very complicated. Why is the person blowing too much histamine? Maybe they're not. Maybe it's a DAO deficiency problem, right? Like these are some things we have to sort out. All right, so let's talk about what activates your mast cells. Let's even go back deeper into root cause. What is causing the mast cells to activate and blow their histamine? Allergens, common allergens. So it might be pollen, dust mites, animal dander. I hate to think of animals as causing problems because we love our pets, but it could be certain foods that you're eating. It could be insect venom. It could be latex. It could be a whole myriad of things. So if you're feeling yourself having seasonal allergies when it's pollen season, like right now, you are having a profound histamine response. How is that going to play out in an asthmatic? They're going to have more asthmatic symptoms. They're going to have more of a profound lockdown of their lungs. If you are getting hives, you are having a histamine response. And so then the more interesting question is, why do I have hives? Why am I having an asthmatic attack? Was it the pollen comboed with the fact that I had a glass of red wine, comboed with the fact that I just ate a high histamine food, comboed with the fact that I haven't exercised or been in the sun or mitigated my stress? You see what I'm getting at? That's your average American, right? It can be from infections. So it could be, again, any kind of viral infection. We just went through a Whomper with COVID, right? That's a pretty gnarly virus. Epstein-Barr, Lyme, Candida, SIBO, any of these conditions and infections can cause you to have a profound mast cell activation. Foods, even healthy ones. So there's high histamine foods. I'm going to give you a list in a minute. There's histamine liberators. They're not high histamine foods, but they readily liberate histamine. And then there's lectins and oxalates that some people are sensitive to and reactive to. So again, it's not necessarily the food. It could be the terrain, right? It's the terrain of the individual not tolerating these things. Hormone. Estrogen stimulates mast cell activation. So you're taking your HRT topically, hopefully, and boom, you're having mast cell activation. And interesting, right? We're putting it on our skin, and that's where our mast cells live. But again, they live in our gut and our lungs. And progesterones calm mast cells down. So we want to make sure, this is why I never prescribe estrogen without progesterone, and why I'm such a huge fan of progesterone, even in younger women who don't need any HRT on top of that. Very often progesterone can just be a really beautiful salve for people's immune systems, for their hormones, et cetera. I've been using progesterone since my early 30s. I'm a huge fan. I probably should have been using it in my 20s, to be honest with you. And then we've got perimenopause and menopause happening, and perimenopause is so chaotic, and so is PMS and PMDD. I really think that PMDD, honestly, might be potentially just being exacerbated in most cases by a histamine response. If we can calm the histamine response down, most of my patients with PMDD, that's like a really severe form of PMS, it can usually be calmed way down too, if we can get the histamine response to chill the F out. There's environmental toxins and factors in the world. Again, mold, VOCs, off-gassing from your paint, your plastics and things like that, cleansers, candles, lots of people burning candles in their house, people burning incense, formaldehyde, fragrances, chemical exposures. Think of all the chemicals. This whole like TikTok beauty thing is all these young women just putting on layers and layers and layers of serums and skincare, and then layers of makeup, and all of those things, unless they are specifically clean, are full of chemicals we may or may not want on our skin. And natural stuff isn't better either. Natural stuff is chemicals too, you guys. Essential oils are chemicals too. People react to those too. In fact, I can't use most products with essential oils in them because my skin totally reacts and I get a rash. I have a histamine response. So it's not just that natural's better. It's like, what are we putting into our system that is aggravating our system? And that's going to be different for everybody. There's temperature and physical triggers. This is where it gets really fun. You go to the gym, you have a great workout, you get back in your car, you're covered in hives. That's not fun, right? Hot exposure, cold exposure. People get hives and get super itchy when they jump into cold plunges. I know that's true for me. I have a really difficult time. Vibration. Any of you ever have a vibration gun used on you? And it's, it's massaging, like the massage type guns, and it's massaging you. And then the next thing you know, all of a sudden you're super itchy. There's this massager called the G5 that we use in chiropractics. And it's this huge, it's like an engine almost, and you put it on people and it's supercharged vibration, makes me itch like crazy when it's done to me. So all kinds of things. Medications or supplements. I think we talked about some of those. I'll add a few more here. NSAIDs, of course, opioids, muscle relaxers, contrast dye. Let's talk about contrast dye for a minute. This is the dye they put in your veins so that they can see things on images. So now it's in your veins, and you're having an allergic reaction to it. That sucks. That's happened to me. It sucks. It really sucked. Some antibiotics can cause this, like vancomycin, for example, can cause red man syndrome. That red is histamine. If you write on yourself like this on your skin with your fingernail, it's called geographic. If it puffs up, that's a histamine response. If you are one of those people that gets like the prickly red kind of on you, I get it on my chest, that's a histamine response. And then it gets more fun. This is when we start to get into MCAS. Mast cells can auto-activate. Great, right? So they can auto-activate themselves, and they can they don't auto-activate themselves. They trigger and activate mast cells nearby. so they can set off their own cascade, if you will. It's their own chemical chain reaction. Good times. So you can see there's a lot going on here, and it is contingent upon you finding somebody who you can work with, who can help you get to the bottom of this. And this is not a simple, let's run a gut test and there, voila. This takes a lot of time. It often takes finances that not everybody has, I understand. I don't have a simple answer for you. My approach is to avoid high histamine foods, which I'm about to give you a list of, and to treat the gut first. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, although I can't go into detail because it's different for everybody, but we'll get to that in a second. So first off, just quick list, fermented and aged foods. We've got aged cheeses like Parmesan, Gouda, blue cheese. I love Parmesan so much. I could eat Parmesan straight for days. Yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, tempeh, soy sauce, tamari, vinegar, especially balsamic, and wine vinegars. Literally just listed off my entire favorite foods in the world. Aged or cured meats, second favorite. Salami, pepperoni, prosciutto, smoked or canned fish like sardines, mackerel, anchovies, bacon, ham, deli meats. Deli meats are super high in histamine. Oh, I know, right? This is such a bummer. Alcohol, I said, the big culprits are red wine and champagne and beer. None of those love me the way that I love them. Seafood, especially if it's not super fresh. I won't give you the list because I'm not a big seafood fan, but you can look it up. Certain fruits and veggies, and then leftovers. Again, anything leftover is probably not my BFF. So here's some histamine liberators. Remember, they don't contain histamine themselves, but they do get your mast cells to activate and release it. So there's citrus fruits. I know, it's sad. Citrus fruits, strawberries, tomatoes, pineapple, bananas, papaya, chocolate. Yes, dark chocolate, my favorite food group. Shellfish is also high in histamine, and it's a histamine liberator. Alcohol, again. Egg whites. I don't really like egg whites, you guys. You've heard me talk about how I think egg whites are like poser eggs. I'm all for the yolk. Food dyes and additives. This is one of the reasons why we want to get them out of our food or just avoid. We can fight all day about food dyes and additives in food. I'm going to go off on my Maha rant again. I don't really care about any of that stuff. Just avoid it. Just don't put it in front of your kids. Don't buy it. Don't bring it home. Just don't do it. Like, it's not that hard. I was totally poor, in bankruptcy, should have been on food stamps, broke as a single mom, and I still was able to feed my child effectively without bringing home any food dyes or additives into the cupboard and into the fridge. Like, it's not that hard. It just requires you to break your addiction to your favorite junk foods so you quit justifying feeding them to your kids. If that makes you upset, I'm sorry, but that is the truth. And then certain nuts, especially walnuts, cashews, and peanuts, these are histamine liberators. All right. So what do I do? Oh, let's talk about estrogen. Let's talk about the estrogen and the reel that I made that really, really took off. Estrogen makes your mast cells more unstable. So it triggers histamine release and it blocks DAO at the same time. That's problematic, right? And it increases histamine receptor sensitivity. So it's a triad of problems. And this might be the very reason why you feel terrible. If you're one of the people who takes estrogen replacement therapy and you cannot tolerate it, you very well may have a histamine issue. Again, this is education. I am not your doctor. I am not telling you how to treat anything, but I'm telling you, most of the patients who didn't tolerate estrogen well, or who tolerated it for a minute and then stopped tolerating it well, if we get to the root of it and we start to deal with the histamine to some degree, we usually can make the estrogen replacement therapy more tolerable. So don't just up and quit your estrogen, please. That is a very dangerous and terrible thing to do. It's not dangerous in the fact that I don't think you're going to die, but it can be miserable and it can send you into vasospasm. That's really what hot flashes are, is vasospasm. So truly, if you're somebody who tends to hot flashes and you're concerned about your estrogen and you were to just stop it abruptly instead of titrating off of it with the help of your doctor to test out if you feel better, you could have that response of hot flashes. And what people don't appreciate, I did a whole podcast about this episode. We'll make sure that's in the show notes too. Hot flashes are vasospasms. Vasospasms are bad. That means your vasculature is spasming, right? It's just manifesting as a hot flash. Hot flashes are the harbinger of doom. So please don't just quit your estrogen mamsy-pamsy if you're concerned here. Histamine drives more estrogen. So histamine isn't just a symptom, it's a hormone disruptor, basically. So it stimulates gonadotrophin releasing hormone in the brain, which triggers a luteinizing hormone and FSH actually, which tells your ovaries to pump out more estrogen. So if you're a perimenopausal girl like me and you still have functional ovaries and you're still having regular cycles, but you're getting lower and lower in estrogen because you've tested and you found out, and you add a little estrogen in and you're having a hard time, it's one of those things where you need estrogen sometimes. Not all the time. So that can get tricky. Find a doctor who can work with you on this. This is a tumultuous roller coaster ride. That's literally what your hormones look like during perimenopause. And it's not always estradiol. It could be estrone. So middle-aged women are often told that their estrogens are low, but they don't do a breakdown of what the difference is. Estrone is made in your fat. So you have estradiol, which is your active estrogen that comes out of your ovaries when you're pre-menopause and you are having periods. You have estriol, which is made by the pregnant body. And then you have estrone, which is made by the postmenopausal body. It is coming from your fat. So the more fat you have, regardless of age, the more estrone you likely have. And estrone is not my favorite thing. It's a mast cell irritant. And so it can make you feel puffy, irritable, swollen, anxious. I don't love estrone. I think estrone is actually a bigger deal than people make it out to be. And a lot of doctors who say, oh, you don't need hormones after menopause because you have plenty of fat and therefore you'll make plenty of estrogen. What they're talking about is estrone. Don't love estrone. It's a little gentler than estradiol, but I'm not a big fan. I think it's a real issue with metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction, there's a whole other driver. I'm not even going to get into that today. Metabolic dysfunction, which is the core of my platform, which is everything I always talk about. You guys know that is what I beat the drum on constantly. If your insulin's off, that's like such a long conversation of what histamine and insulin and metabolic health are, how that whole thing's working out. So I'm saving that conversation. This is just to get you the kind of histamine 101. There are a lot of symptoms that you might be having, like food sensitivities or puffy under eyes. Look at my puffy under eyes, or loose stools, or migraines, or mood changes, or all kinds of things we've talked about already. Anxiety out of nowhere. All of those things can be histamine issues. And we're blaming certain foods and we're blaming certain things, or we're maybe thinking we're crazy. A lot of it's histamine issues. So how do we treat it? I carry DAO around in my purse. I take it with meals, especially if I'm kind of in a stage. I know like right now I'm currently in a high histamine stage. So DAO is always on the docket with foods. There are some great herbs you can take and herbal concoctions that you can take. You know, quercetin is a mast cell stabilizer. There's different supplements that you can take. And there's companies that make, you know, a few different things in one bottle or one capsule. I'm not giving medical advice, but look up mast cell stabilizers and histamine herbs and do some research there. Sorry, tongue twisters. And then I treat the gut. And how do I do that? That I cannot tell you. It's different for everyone. I treat the gut. And depending on how high their histamine is and how intense their MCAS reaction is, tells me how I'm going to handle the gut. Sometimes I'm very slow and gingerly, and other times I whomp it. But I'm not going to throw an arsenal of anti-parasitic and antimicrobial and antifungal herbs at a patient hardcore and then watch them have a Herxheimer reaction and be like, oh, that's just the way it is, which is what so many of these like parasite experts, the fact that there are people online that are parasite experts that have hundreds of thousands of followers that are selling you parasite detoxes baffles my mind, because you can drive parasites into the brain. You can drive them further into the liver. You can cause some really, really terrible reactions that lead to death by hitting people too hard with herbs. You also can cause what I just mentioned, which is a Herxheimer reaction, which is unnecessary and it's terrible. And what it is you start lysing these cells that secrete lipopolysaccharide. And guess what happens then? You basically have these endo and exotoxins flowing through your body, and your histamine response to that goes haywire. So you send their immune system further into chaos, and that can be devastating for people. And they not only call you freaking out saying, I feel like I'm having the worst flu of my life. I have the worst migraine. I had to go to the hospital. But you can, once you trigger a severe histamine response, I once had a 9-month-long histamine response, you guys. 9 months, because a doctor hit me too hard with herbs and supplements and chelated me for heavy metals. That's another big cause of robust histamine issues, is heavy metals. hit me so hard, so fast that my body dumped the metals from my fat cells. This is the best guess I could give. It was not a gentle, gingerly push or nudge. And I ended up in 9 months of hives, chronic hives, to the point where I wanted to end my existence because I couldn't stand the itching anymore. And it was in the depths of winter. So everything I wore to keep warm just made me super, super itchy. And it was awful. It was so awful, you guys. And so I say this from experience. Don't just buy these fly-by-night programs off of some influencer on Instagram who happens to have a lot of followers. You really, because these anti-parasitic herbs are also often antimicrobial and antifungal. If you start killing off stuff too fast, too hard in the gut, you can create a lot of terrible things. And I will add this story. I had a patient who decided to take it upon himself to basically firebomb his gut with certain strains of probiotics. By the way, there's certain strains of probiotics that can cause a severe histamine reaction. He was on them and did this whole gut cleanse that he heard about from some famous doctor online. And he ended up taking his own life in a parking lot. Older guy, under my watch, my patient. And I was trying to walk him through a gut protocol very carefully, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. That was honestly the first day that I decided I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. It took me 5 years to get out of practice after that, but that was the first glimmer of like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is not fun. So, yeah. So don't just go after your gut is what I'm telling you. Please do this under the guidance of somebody who actually knows what they're doing, somebody you pay money to, not just buy their program online. Don't just buy, even if it's a doctor, even if it's a famous doctor, don't buy their freaking protocols online because you joined their membership and got their protocol and are slamming yourself with products. Just don't do it, right? I'm not going to name any product lines, but it's not the products that are the problem. It's the way they're being utilized and sold as like these very simple, protocols, and they may not be so simple for you. So know that you have DAO potentially deficiency issues happening in some of these folks with histamine issues. And so you may need to supplement the DAO, not you, but those of you listening who are clinicians. And then there's all these lifestyle factors that I mentioned and the foods these people are eating. So even if you are clearing out their gut and trying to heal up their gut, you might very well be aggravated. They may very well be aggravating. It's like you're over here trying to put water on a fire to put the fire out, and they're like drowning it in lighter fluid because of the foods they're choosing to eat and the lifestyle they're continuing to have, right? So this is problematic in many cases. And I found that most patients don't want to be compliant. They think they'll just take the pills and it'll all be fine. And that's not how it works. You can't keep drinking the red wine and eating the Parmesan cheese and all the high histamine foods and expecting it all to go away, especially if the foods you're eating are feeding the bad bugs, and the bad bugs are what is responsible for a huge part of the histamine overreactivity. Last thing, where do GLP-1s play into this? I think they have a huge role. I think GLP-1s play a major role in dealing with excessive histamine and MCAS. And I have clinicians on the ground utilizing it in their practices, people who take care of very sick individuals, very sensitive individuals, telling me it's been a complete game changer for them. If you'd like to know more about some of the ways that GLP-1s are impactful throughout the body that you maybe haven't heard about, I encourage you to check out my GLP-1 Uncovered 4-part video series. It's free. It's completely free. You'll get a new video in your inbox each day, and you will hear a whole different story than you've been told by the media. And I highly encourage you to check it out. If you want to learn about how I utilize GLP-1s in my clinical practice, I have a whole course about it. It's called GLP-1s Done Right University. It is a course for clinicians and practitioners, but I am letting the general public in, and I highly encourage you to check that out. It is a deep dive on how I handle a terrain-based treatment program and how I go about making sure that we optimize metabolic health first in all cases, and where GLP-1s play in there. We talk about hormones, we talk about exercise, we talk about all the things. And I'm actually going to be bringing on one of my doctor friends. We've got, I think, 13 plus expert interviews in there. We're going to add her in because I want to get her take on how she's utilizing GLP-1s to modulate MCAS in her practice. So check that out. You can find it at www.drtyna.com/Ozempic Uncovered. You also find the link in my show notes. It's now called GLP-1s Uncovered. So that's it for my Histamine 101. This is the basics. I hope that you understand it better. I hope you understand that it's multifactorial. I hope you understand that it's complicated. It's not as simple as taking an antihistamine. It's not as simple as taking a supplement. There is no simple solution to stabilizing your mast cells and stabilizing your histamine. I know I said that in the reel, but that is like a whole rabbit hole to go down. So I'm going to bring on a histamine expert. I promise we'll get her on the show soon, but you guys have been literally begging me in my DMs and in emails to get you guys this episode. So here it is. I hope this helps. The foods you choose to put in your mouth matter a lot. GLP-1s, I think, are a really beautiful adjunct. I will tell you straight up that every single doctor I've talked to, for the most part, 99.9% of them, when they tell me they're microdosing, they're actually just using standard doses. Now, that may work for you. I don't think that is appropriate for everybody. I think some people really, especially if they're very sensitive, may have to go lower. I think GLP-1s can actually set off your histamine if done wrong, because it shifts your gut microbiome so significantly in some people that they feel worse. And so I am a big fan of the way that I do it and teach it inside my course. To get to that course and to get a discount on that course, again, head to drtyna.com/Ozempic Uncovered. Go through the free 4-part video series. You will be invited to purchase the bigger course. And inside that course is where I deep dive. I talk about my clinical dosing strategy. I don't tell you exactly how to dose because it's different for every person, but I explain it so it makes sense. So you can have a conversation with your doctor, or if you're a clinician, it'll make sense to you on how to do it. I talk about all the other adjunctive things we need to be doing as we're utilizing GLP-1s, because they are not a solo monotherapy. They do not work in isolation. There's more to it. And I've got a ton of expert interviews in there. I actually already have one on MCAS, but I'm going to bring on my other friend who that is predominantly her practice, and I'm going to hear from her too. So we're going to add that in soon. And it's a beautiful course, and it's a great deep dive. And for all of the general public who's come in there, I've surveyed some of them, and they have all told me the same thing, that it is the best education that they've gotten when it comes to hormones and metabolic health and how to put it all together. It's what they've been looking for. I had one person tell me that they've spent tens of thousands of dollars on their medical care, and nobody would put it together for them the way that this course put it together for them. So I hope you'll check it out. It's a great opportunity, and grab it while it's on discount when you go through that funnel. With that, I will bid you adieu. I'll be back on more on this topic. I'm not going to do like a 10-part series on it. I encourage you to find a doctor who can help you. How to do that, I do not know, because I cannot refer you to anybody, and I'm not taking any patients. Please do not ask. I get bombarded every time I do podcasts like this, and we just can't answer you because we can't help you. But I do have a free resource called Find a Doc. You can find it on my website at drtyna.com/find a doc. You could just find it on the tab there at drtyna.com. And it's a 30-minute video on what I would look for in a good doctor. If you're looking for a doctor to help you, these are the things that I would be looking for if I were in your shoes and I was trying to find somebody. I cannot legally make referrals for you, so there's nobody that I can refer you to. So please, again, don't write us and ask, because we can't help you. And we feel bad not answering, but we get so many of these requests every day that we just can't answer them anymore. And I am not taking any clients or patients at this point at all. So please do not. I sometimes get really heart-wrenching, sad stories from people, and it breaks my heart. It truly breaks my heart. And I walk around just feeling nothing but exorbitant guilt over it. So don't send them to me, because I can't help you, because I can't take anybody on as a client right now or a patient. So I will bid you adieu. I wish you the best, and I hope this was helpful. And we will see you on the next round. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.